Welcome to the first episode of NYU AGSA Radio. I am your host, Pony White, and I am the editor of AGSA. AGSA stands for the African Grad Student Association. This year, we decided after, I believe, 2 years of nothing, of silence, we decided to revamp the NYU AGSA Radio. On this first episode, Back to School Away from Home, I was joined by Yara Akbaraly, an African grad student from Madagascar. Yara and I discuss what it is like for African students to pursue an education away from home, and specifically within the Western world. We talk about what obstacles students like Yara have to face to acclimating to America, what was the motivation for her to seek education outside of the continent, and how does this shape the future development of the continent? Being an international student is a unique experience, and on this episode of AGSA Radio, we dive into it. Okay, hello everybody. This is the first episode of AGSA Radio, and I'm definitely nervous, but I am joined here by Yara, and she's been keeping me grounded in all of this. I'm going to allow Yara to introduce herself a little bit.
Hi everybody, I'm Yara. I am a master's student in the journalism school, and I'm from Madagascar.
Super cool. When Yara told me she was from Madagascar, I was like, yeah, and I need you on this podcast, because like we definitely want like African representation from like all over the continent and not just one like sub-region. So I'm just like so grateful to like talk to you and ask about like your international student process, and how it's been like being at school in the US, so far away from home, and also just like what brought you to school out here. So my first question for today is just, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm super happy to be here, so thank you. When I was younger, I always wanted to work in either science or journalism. And then I thought maybe I'd combine the two, but then things just sort of got out of track, and that is why I'm studying journalism today. So I think I started from the beginning.
I love that. Okay, so can you walk us through like why NYU? Like why specifically New York University, and specifically in the US? Because NYU has a lot of campuses globally, but like why did you decide this school to study journalism?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in London. I always went to an American school, so I think English was always easier for me. I always studied in that language. And I always knew that I wanted to do my master's in the US, just having that whole like experience, especially in New York City. I mean, it's a world in itself. And I actually wasn't supposed to do my master's this year. I actually had a few health challenges, and then in January I took my first trip after many years of not traveling, and my brother was an undergrad at NYU, so we were walking around Washington Square Park, and he was just showing me around, and I thought to myself, you know what, why not, let's just try and apply. And that actually closed the deadlines, so I emailed them on the day, and they told me, actually today we have extended the deadline. Ooh. And I thought that's a sign I have to do it. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds so amazing. Okay, so like walk us through the process then. As an international student, how difficult or easy is it to like apply for a school outside of your country?
You mean the actual like application process?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the difficult part of being an international student is more when you're trying to find an apartment. I feel like the application process is it's quite direct. You know, the essays and the cover letters. I think finding teachers, professors to write a letter for your recommendation letter, that's always, I guess, complicated for some students because perhaps they didn't study in a country or city where English was the main language, so then that always has to be translated. But I think because I had studied in the UK and I knew, the whole process already, it was not too complicated.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I know, like, for me, I mean, I am African. I was born on the continent, but I grew up in America. And so the process was, I feel like the biggest, like, the hardest aspect of my process was, I think, my statement of purpose. Just like making sure that was grounded and making sure that it was all the information that they wanted. And I think I spent like about roughly a month if I were to calculate all the time that it spent for me to write my statement of purpose and make sure that it really like represented the work that I've done in myself and why I wanted to come to the university. So what was the hardest process for you? I know you mentioned a little bit housing. Like, what was the hardest process in all of this for you in getting to NYU?
I think now that you mentioned the statement of purpose during the application process, I think just being international as everybody is today, with globalization, just trying to identify yourself, who you are in this world, and why you want to do what you're doing and why you're here in the first place. That was somewhat difficult to put in like 500 words. So trying to encapsulate everything in just one page, that was difficult. But in terms of housing, it's been a challenge, a little bump on the road. I think the housing market here is quite complex. And especially as international students, you need guarantors or third-party guarantors, and then you need to have, you have to pay the triple amount salary. So that whole process is complicated. And the competition, the market is super competitive. I feel like the demand is so high and there's not that much supply. So it's just, everything is just misbalanced. So that was a struggle, but I'm happy where I'm at now. And we made it happen.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about that the process of like writing your statement of purpose is kind of like figuring out like who are you and like what do you want to represent? Like how have you navigated and figured out like words to articulate who you are, and do you feel like that's well represented in the NYU community?
I mean, NYU community and also New York City, which is why I think this is definitely the hub of the world, which is also why I chose journalism here, because it's, the possibilities are endless. But in terms of my representation, I think whatever I want to do, I want to bring back home. So I always want to do something for my home, which is Madagascar. I'm actually half Italian, half Indian. So I think just all of these different mixes makes, my identity quite blurry. So that's why the statement of purpose was a bit difficult, and also just describing yourself. I think the application in American universities are a lot more open compared to the British system. So they allow you to truly express yourself and have your personal voice throughout the essay, but that also makes it more difficult because you're trying to figure yourself out at the same time. So
how has it been like establishing community like within like NYU and within New York City, as somebody, as you said, like coming from a diverse background, but also coming from like the continent? I know like with me, like it's so important to be a part of like AGSA because I always say like I'm Black, I'm woman, and then I'm African. If I were to like frame, or sometimes it's like I'm Black, I'm African, and I'm woman, just depending the day. But I know those are like identities that are so important to me. How has it been for you to be like in this atmosphere, and kind of like building community?
So I'm really drawn to people's energies and just similar values and outlooks in life. But I think just because by being in New York, you have so much option. So it's also just interesting to kind of test and see, maybe someone I've never spoken to before and how that sort of connects to my life as well. But I think community is so important. That's why I'm a part of this community. And I think you always have to have a piece of home with you, right? Like your roots have to be with you, just to remember where you come from and who you want to be and where you're going. But I think it's also super important to kind of get out of your comfort zone and just, being such an amazing city, you're here, you have the opportunity to be here, so make the most of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so a question that I do have, which it's kind of political in nature, because when we think about like young people leaving the continent, especially young people who have the opportunities to like travel abroad, study abroad, move. When we think about that, there's kind of like this mixture of like, yay, we're doing this. Like we're conquering the Western world. Like we have presence, we have opportunities. But then there's also this air of like, we're leaving home and we know that the continent has a history of, imperialism, colonialism, gentrification. And so there's kind of this like negative air of all of the great minds are leaving and then not coming back or bringing anything back to the continent. So I guess like I'm just interested in when you were thinking about studying like in the Western world, so to speak, did that come up for you in thought? Like, has that ever been like a concern of yours? And just kind of like where you stand in that whole conversation of like, should we be pushing, African folks on the continent to kind of like go out there, flourish, conquer the Western world? Or is it something that we should be focused more our energies on? Like, how do we build schools that can support us in our education and that can compete, with Western education as well? So yeah, I would just love to hear from you about like that. I know that was like a very loaded question.
No, I mean, it's a very interesting question. I mean, the brain drain is real. But I do think that the young diaspora, African diaspora, is crucial in, developing the continent. And there's so much potential in the continent. And between those two options, whether it's better to go abroad and then, learn as much as you can from the Western world, or start creating and developing from the internal aspect, I guess, like schools, etc. I think in order to be able to create the schools or build more infrastructure within, you do want to see what is out there if you have the opportunity to do so.
Right.
I think it's actually quite complex because you don't want to, it's so different, like culturally, socially, economically, so you don't want to copy paste exactly what's happening in the Western world into the continent, right?
Right.
But I think it's interesting to take pieces that you think could work with your own knowledge, because you do have the local knowledge. So fusing those two together and then bringing it back home.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to come with the mindset of everything that you've learned from the Western world. That is super helpful, but you do have that gift of growing up in this continent. So I think, using those two strengths to your advantage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do really believe in coming back home. And, I think that a lot of, these young individuals with so much potential, including, hopefully us, if we do go back home, which is, I think that if we do come back home, then, there has to be more of a shift, a structural shift.
Yeah.
Because those that do come back home cannot seem to change the way things are working.
Yeah.
Despite having that knowledge.
Right.
So there has to be more of a bigger structural change that is already sorry, we can cut that off,
no,
I got lost in my thoughts.
No, you were eating. Your thoughts are definitely eating.
Oh
I hear everything. No, there was so much that you said it like that's just very valid. Like, like I think it is so important that when we do go back home, we're not just going back home for vacation. We're not just going back home for enjoyment, which those things are very important. And especially like, I would say for like Africans who are Black or darker skin, like I know being in the Western world comes with its own forms of oppression that can feel very foreign. Like colorism, racism, can be very prominent in like America and Europe. And so sometimes like being able to go back to somewhere where you are the majority, or being able to go back to somewhere where like race is not such a conscious like thing that everybody is thinking about and everybody is talking about, it can be like very relaxing, but also to just be very aware that like we're not just using the continent in a very similar like colonial way where it's like, oh, I can just exploit my people now that I have this knowledge, now that I have this education and this leverage in the Western world, I can exploit the continent and then run back to like, my apartment in New York, my home in Jersey. But that we're being more intentional in saying like, what can I give to soil that, brought me up and that like made it possible for me to be all the things that I want to be. So like, I really appreciate you touching on all of that. So pivoting just a little bit, I would love to know about the visa process. I hear like that's from everybody and their mom. I hear that's like the toughest process, and it's the most nerve wracking because I hear that sometimes like you don't even know if you're good until like a week before school starts. So how, like, what is that like? I know nothing.
Wow. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I don't even think I remember because there was so much to do. I literally, like, my older brother had done it before, and I was complaining, and he's like, you just gotta do it. Like, it is what it is. But there's just so many documents that you have to fill out, and one of them, like, loads reloads like 500 times and you can't even you don't have time to save it. So I was literally doing it in the taxi with my computer, hotspotting with the Wi-Fi. It's just a whole process. It's quite complicated, but once you do get it, wow, it's worth it.
Wow.
And you're just super excited. I actually went back home 2 months ago to get my visa because I couldn't get it anywhere else because I'm resident there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that was quite quick, but I think it's more the process before that, like all the documents I have to fill out.
Yeah.
And there are many.
Wow.
Many
Okay.
documents.
So on the brim of that, what advice do you give for other students on the continent and just other international students anywhere, any student anywhere who is like, I would love to study abroad. I would love to study in America at NYU, New York. What advice do you give for them in that process?
In the visa process?
In all of the process. You could be specific to the visa process, but just like the process in general of becoming an international student.
I think the visa process, there's not much to say because it's all it's just legal stuff. It's just, filling out papers and there's not much to do about that. But I have to say, I think I want to touch upon more of just being away from home aspect of that's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, you're not alone. New York is a really big city. It's quite intimidating, but we all feel the same, I think. And there will always be your people somewhere.
Yeah.
And you just have to, get out there, get out of your comfort zone, join clubs, join communities, and just truly listen to your instincts. And, people have so much to offer, different insights, different cultures, and just absorb it all because you truly chose a city that's actually a world.
Yeah.
And make the most of that because there's so much to do. And I don't know if you want to be here forever, but time is quite limited, especially, if you're in a visa and, you don't want to be here forever, you do have a couple of years and just to make the most of that.
Right.
But it's definitely worth it. And there are some amazing people.
Yeah.
We just met today and we've been talking.
This is my girl. This is our girl. She's gonna be on my podcast. That's actually Liddy, where we chat. We chat real chat. But yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. You said that there's a world to explore in New York. Where have you been exploring in New York? Where are the hot spots? Where do all the, new folks need to know about?
Oof, well, I'm a foodie.
Okay,
I'm a really big foodie. I spend so much time just on Belly, scrolling all this. I discovered Belly when I moved in. It's changed my life.
Amen.
So I've been scrolling. I've been a lot in the West Village area, East Village. Brooklyn has some amazing restaurants, like tapa style. And yeah, I've been exploring some jazz clubs, some comedy clubs, just everything that I've never been to before and that New York can provide me with.
Yeah.
And just meeting new people in those settings, to be honest, because everybody's just there for one reason, which is to have a good time.
Yeah.
And just good vibes. And yeah, it's been great.
Okay, awesome. I have one more question for you. I'm going to ask the question.
If you want, it's okay.
I was going to ask, you're talking food, you said you're a big foodie. I am limited on Madagascar cuisine, but what if I pull up today to Madagascar, what do I need to get?
Well, our food is quite basic, but we produce a lot of rice. So the base is rice always.
Yeah.
And we actually have our own beef cow. It's called a zebu.
Okay.
And it's basically a mix between a camel and a cow.
Interesting.
So it's a cow with a really big hump on its back. And its meat is super lean but so good. And we have our own rice. It's red rice. But we have some plates called rumazava. So it's rice with the meat and some bread, which is some vegetable. So we have this other plate called raftutu, which is so good. And we have a lot of coconut milk rice. We have amazing mangoes. People debate a lot, but we have the best mangoes.
I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to take your word for it because I feel don't fight me for this. I feel I need to keep a general front, I love everybody. But I will say that I feel there are some African countries who want to be amazing at, I'm cutting this off because they're going to kill me. However, I will say that I think when the African countries who are not always yelling say, this is what we're good at, I believe them. Because that's why we sound like Liberians. We're
amazing at cooking. Like, we economics, we don't really have it. Like, and you know, I'm blaming the war for that, but like, we have our issues. But when it comes to food, we're definitely in that top 5. We're definitely in that top 5. Like, you gotta get yourself some Liberian food. So I trust you and believe you that I love mango. So now I know, like, I need to go to Madagascar. I need to get everything you're telling me about, because this, like, cow, camel meat, like, this is putting me on. And then I need to just, like, live in Mangoville. So I trust you. I believe that Madagascar has the best mangoes on the continent and maybe even in the world.
And I trust that you're going to have to invite me over and you're going to have to cook for me, because you're the best cook, apparently.
Girl, there's going to be... AGSA's actually having a Africa week or something like that. And they're doing, I think, a jollof rice war. Oh. I will be making my jollof rice. I got you. I feel like jollof rice is outplayed, but like, I'll do it. I'll do it one time for one time. But, well, thank you so much, girl. Those are all the questions that I have for you. If you want to share anything, let anybody know where to find you. If you want to share socials, feel free to. But those are all the questions that I have.
Okay, well, my name's Yara Akbaraly. I have Instagram. I have Gmail.
I'll drop it.
I have LinkedIn.
I'll drop it in the show notes for sure. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again.
This has been amazing.
And thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode. And thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode of AGSA Radio.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.